The Hebrew noun tzitzit, tzitzit, is the name for specially knotted ritual fringes, or tassels, worn in antiquity by Israelites and today by observant Jews and Samaritans. Tzitzit are attached to the four corners of the talit and talit katan. Other pronunciations include Biblical and Middle Eastern, Tzitzit, Spanish and Mediterranean, Tzitzit, European and Yiddish, Tzitzis, Yemenite, Sizith, Samaritan, Sasat. Etymology. The word may derive from the Semitic root ntzh. The ending it is the feminine adjectival suffix, used here to form a feminine singular noun. Ntzh comes from the root word for flower, and originally meant a tassel, or lock, as in the book of Ezekiel, where Ezekiel is picked up by an angel and carried by a lock of hair. In English language academic texts on Judaica, the term is sometimes rendered show fringes. In the Hebrew Bible the use is singular, but the feminine plural tzitzit is found in later texts. The Septuagint translation is tassels. Biblical origin. The Torah states in Numbers chapter 15 verse 38, "Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, that they shall make themselves tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations. And they shall put on the corner tassel a blue-violet thread." Wearing the tzitzit is also commanded in Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 12. "You shall make yourself twisted cords on the four corners of your garment with which you cover yourself." Tassels, tzitziyot, today are attached to the talit and talit katan. The talit katan itself is commonly referred to as tzitzit. According to the Torah, the purpose of wearing tzitzit is to remind Jews of their religious obligations. In addition, it serves as a reminder of the exodus from Egypt. The Talmud equates its observance with that of all the mitzvot. Maimonides includes it as a major commandment along with circumcision and the Passover offering. The blue thread is omitted by most rabbinic Jews due to controversy over the dye-making process. Kilayim permissive. Torah law forbids kilayim, intertying wool and linen together. Rabbinic Judaism, but not Karaite Judaism, makes an exemption to this law, the two exceptions being garments of Kohanim and Tzitzit. Concerning tzitzit, Chazal permit using wool and linen strings in tandem only when what they hold to be genuine teklit is available, whereas Kabbalist sources take it a step further by encouraging its practice. Threads and knots. The tassel on each corner is made of 4 strands, which must be made with intent. These strands are then threaded and hang down, appearing to be 8. The 4 strands are passed through a hole 1 to 2 inches away from the corner of the cloth. There are numerous customs as to how to tie the tassels. The Talmud explains that the Bible requires an upper knot and one wrapping of 3 winds. The Talmud enjoined that between 7 to 13 huliot be tied, and that one must start and end with the color of the garment. As for the making of knots in between the huliot, the Talmud is inconclusive, and as such poskim have interpreted this requirement in various ways. The Talmud described tying assuming the use of teklit dye. However, following the loss of the source of the dye, various customs of tying were introduced to compensate for the lack of this primary element. Though many methods exist, the one that gained the widest acceptance can be described as follows. The 4 strands of the tzitzit are passed through holes near the 4 corners of the garment that are farthest apart. 4 tzitzit are passed through each hole, and the 2 groups of 4 ends are double knotted to each other at the edge of the garment near the hole. One of the 4 tzitzit is made longer than the others. The long end of that one is wound around the other 7 ends and double knotted. This is done repeatedly so as to make a total of 5 double knots separated by 4 sections of winding, with a total length of at least 4 inches, leaving free hanging ends that are twice that long. Before tying begins, declaration of intent is recited. Lt mitzvot tzitzit. The 2 sets of strands are knotted together twice, and then the shamash is wound around the remaining 7 strands a number of times. The 2 sets are then knotted again twice. This procedure is repeated 3 times, such that there are a total of 5 knots. the 4 intervening spaces being taken up by windings numbering 7, 8, 1, 1, 1, 3, respectively. The total number of winds comes to 39, which is the same number of winds if one were to tie, according to the Talmud's instruction, of 13 huliot of 3 winds each. Furthermore, the number 39 is found to be significant in that it is the gematria of the words, "The Lord is one," Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 4. Rashi, a prominent Jewish commentator, bases the number of knots on a gematria. The word Tzitzit has the value 600. Each tassel has 8 threads and 5 sets of knots, totaling 13. The sum of all numbers is 613, traditionally the number of mitzvot in the Torah. This reflects the concept that donning a garment with tzitziot reminds its wearer of all Torah commandments. Nachmanides disagrees with Rashi, pointing out that the biblical speaking of the word Tzitzit has only 1 yod rather than 2, thus adding up to the total number of 603 rather than 613. He points out that in the biblical quote, "You shall see it and remember them," the singular form, it, can refer only to the petal of teklet. The teklet strand serves this purpose, explains the Talmud, for the blue color of teklet resembles the ocean, which in turn resembles the sky, which in turn is said to resemble God's holy throne, thus reminding all of the divine mission to fulfill his commandments. Knots are worn by the majority of Sephardic Jews and Taimana Jews. Color of the strings. Traditional Tzitzit teklet is a color dye which the Hebrew Bible commands the Jews to use for 1, 2, or 4 of the 8 half strings hanging down as iakonos, is a specific blue-violet dye produced, according to the rabbis, from a creature referred to as a ilazon, other blue dyes being unacceptable. Interestingly, some explain the black stripes found on many traditional prayer shawls as representing the loss of this dye. Now, while there is no prohibition on wearing blue dye from another source, the rabbis maintain that other kinds of teklet do not fulfill the mitzvah of teklet, and thus all the strings have been traditionally kept undyed for many centuries. Interestingly, in recent times, with the rediscovery of the ilazon in the Murex trunculus mollusk, some have noted that one cannot fulfill the mitzvah of Tzitzit without the teklet strand. This position, however, has been strongly disputed. When teklet is used, there are varying opinions in rabbinic literature as to how many of the strands are to be dyed: 1 of 8, 2 of 8, 4 of 8. While the white threads are to be made of the material of the garment, rabbinic law instructs that the teklet dyed thread must be made of wool. According to several rabbinic sages, blue is the color of God's glory, for staring at this color aids in meditation, bringing us a glimpse of the pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity, which is a likeness of the throne of God. 5. Many items in the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary in the wilderness, such as the menorah, many of the vessels, and the Ark of the Covenant, were covered with a blue-violet cloth when transported from place to place. 6. The other threads in the Tzitzit are described as white. This may be interpreted either literally or as meaning the same color as the main garment. Normally, the garment itself is white so that the divergence does not arise. Similarly, the threads may be made either of wool or of the same fabric as the garment. Again, many authorities recommend using a woolen garment so that all views are satisfied. Karaite Tzitzit. The Karaite Jews maintain that the tzitziot must be braided and have the appearance of chains, rather than being knotted as are the tzitziot of Rabbinic Judaism. Karaite tzitziot have blue-violet threads in them. In contrast to Rabbinic Jews, Karaites believe that the teklet's source can be any dye, except those produced from impure marine species such as mollusks, which would be prohibited by the Torah, proposing instead that the source of the dye was indigo or woad. Karaites also consider synthetic blue or blue-violet to be acceptable for teklet. Contrary to some claims, Karaites do not hang tzitziot on their walls. Samaritan Tzitzit. The Samaritans are a mixed ethno-religious group descendant from the tribes of Ephraim, Manasseh and Levi of the northern kingdom of Samaria and various other ethnic groups. They are a community of about 780 who are divided between Holon, Israel and Mount Gerizim outside of Shechem in Samaria. They retain the Samaritan Pentateuch, a variation of Paleo-Hebrew, and maintain their own traditions. Their numbers fell to only 146 Samaritans in 1917, and over time some Samaritan traditions had been lost. The Samaritans consider the 22 buttons on the right lapel of the gown they wear over their clothes during most holy days and the corresponding loops on its left lapel as their tzitzit. The tzitzit are always in the same color as the gown, which is usually white. Another version of Samaritan tzitzit is the simple fringes on the sides of the very large white tallit worn by the priests when carrying a Torah scroll. Similarly to most Orthodox Rabbinic Jews, the Samaritans hold that the blue-violet eklat thread for their tzitzit was produced from a specific dye and claim that the tradition for producing it was lost, contrary to some rumors. The Samaritans do not use either rabbinic or Karaite tzitzit in archaeology and secular scholarship. According to the modern documentary hypothesis, the reference to tzitzit in Numbers comes from the priestly code, while that from Deuteronomy comes from the Deuteronomic code, and hence they date to around the late 8th century BCE and late 7th century BCE, respectively, some time after the practice began to be in use. The custom, however, clearly predates these codes, and was not limited to Israel. Images of the custom have been found on several ancient Near East inscriptions in contexts suggesting that it was practiced across the Near East. Some scholars believe that the practice among ancients originated due to the wearing of animal skins, which have legs at each corner, and that later fabrics symbolize the presence of such legs, first by the use of amulets, and later by tzitzit.